thank you for taking the time to download and listen to this podcast from Celtic Underground. You are possibly picking this up on thecelticunderground.substack.com. If you are a paid subscriber, you can link your account to wherever you pick up your podcasts, whether that be Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever, and you can pick up the subscription feed where you get your normal feed. Just go on to Substack on the website and follow the instructions. Meantime, this is Andrew H. Smith in conversation.
Hi, welcome to our latest Celtic Underground in Conversation series, where I'm delighted to join maybe the most newly minted Celtic author we have in a great pantheon of authors. John Wight, lovely to see you.
Thank you very much. Love to be with you, Andrew.
And it's great to have you on. And I mean, your books, this is what we're on to talk about.
Yeah, Jungle Days.
Jungle Days. And I think it's only, is it out about a month or so?
Came out on the 22nd of September, so a couple of months.
All right, it was. Yeah, I just got the publisher, stuff for the publisher maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I just assumed it was out then. So, I mean, how's it been?
It's been fantastic. I've had wonderful feedback. I'm gratified to report. I've had about 5 or 6 reviews. Wonderful review in the Irish Times last weekend, or the Irish Mirror, sorry. So it's been very well received, which is obviously incredibly gratifying for me because,
Of course,
as you'll know, Celtic is a huge subject. So I had to be confident before I embarked on this journey, writing the book, which every book is a journey, that I could do it justice because the club means so much to people all over the world. And it seems like it's hit home. Obviously, I know there are some contentious points I make in the book, some contentious arguments, political and social, etc., that not every Celtic fan will agree with. But that's fine. But I was hoping, my big hope is that it would have an impact and maybe be a catalyst for conversation and debate about Celtic, its meaning, its history, so on. Especially now, I think, because let's be honest, Celtic is going through a turbulent period. And so sometimes when you're going through a turbulent period and a club that means so much for many different reasons, which I try and outline in the book, you need to have that kind of sense of belonging that's anchored in the past, which I try to articulate in the book. No, it's been good. To answer your question, Pressy, it's been very good so far. So I'm very happy with the impact so far and the response.
hugely ambitious what you've taken on here, because we effectively we get a potted kind of 500 years of Irish history.
Mm-hmm.
We go everywhere from the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
In America, we go to like South America, the various revolutionary movements. Absolutely. And in between it, you're talking about Celtic and going to Celtic games and in the jungle and such like. You're really trying to weave an incredibly broad picture.
Well, that's my Celtic was my political education in the 80s. I've said to others, I recall Celtic as being a sanctuary, as I say in my book. When I stepped onto the Celtic supporters bus at Haymarket outside the old Ryries pub, I left one family and was taken into the embrace of another family. And that was incredibly important at a time when I was going through so many, you're a young teenage boy from a working class background, you're dealing with chaos at home. I needed that sense of empowerment that being part of that family, that community gave me at that time. I don't think I'm the only one who would say that, going back to when we were kids in the 80s. And you've got to remember the huge backdrop to Celtic and Rangers and Scottish affairs was what was going on in Ireland with the Troubles. And that really fed into the jungle. I'm sure you will confirm that, with the sense of defiance, rebelliousness. We're rebels by inclination of consciousness. And Celtic, to me, and I'll argue to my last breath, is more than a football club. Not in the trite way that succeeding sort of tranches of hierarchy would maintain. I'm talking about it's more than a football club. It's a political and cultural institution by demonstrable history. And that history has been upheld and maintained by succeeding generations of Celtic fans. And this is why I think it's such an important period that we're in, given the demonisation, if I can bring things up to the present, of the Green Brigade. Just as the jungle was the beating heart of Celtic, the maintenance of its soul back in the 80s, The Green Brigade, in my mind, is plays the same role. It's politics. It's avowed an unapologetic stance on the side of the Palestinians, anti-racism causes around the world, and there's rootedness in Irish Republican politics. Celtic is an Irish Republican institution in all but name. Now, again, I'll make the point again, a lot of Celtic fans will not like that, don't disagree with it. I understand that. They didn't agree with it back when I was supporting Celtic on the terraces. But that, to my mind, is Celtic's identity and it's baked into its DNA.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was there. I mean, it's funny some of the things you bring up that, I mean, I remember it vividly. Sean O'Grady and all that. We talked like that. Like,
Were you
it
at
was a
that game?
nothing game.
Were you at that game?
I was
I'll never
every,
forget that rendition of the Soldier song when he walked on the pitch and he took off his jacket because everybody was like, "Who the f- is this guy?"
it
And I
was
think the
quite
board made a
cheesy, but
mistake because it got such a huge backlash. And as I say in the book, when forced to choose or asked to choose, many Celtic fans will choose Irishness over Scottishness as their primary identity. But as a
yeah,
Celtic fan from a certain background or a migrant background, you learn to deal with that duality. But at that point, at that game, at that half time, we were being asked to choose which identity informs us most. And it was Irish.
yeah, yeah. But you do also make the point that it helped. It was a lot easier to go the Sean O'Grady route because Jim Watt was a Rangers supporter.
Yeah,
That's the divine line as well. You
yeah,
support
yeah.
anybody against a Rangers supporter. I watch quiz shows, and if you find out the guy's a Rangers supporter, you want the other person that's on the quiz show.
Well, I remember, obviously, I started the book with the 80 Cup final, which I was at.
Yep,
Never
I
forget
wasn't
it.
allowed to go.
I know, I was lucky. My mum probably shouldn't have let me go, but she did. My brother persuaded her to let me go. I watched the game back, as you do, and Archie Macpherson was a ubiquitous commentator of Scottish football, and he said it best. And it was almost like he grudgingly had to admit it, watching the scenes on the pitch after the game, the fight and the brawls. He said, let's be honest, these fans hate each other.
Yeah, it's a great line. His other one, isn't it? It's like, this is like the Battle of Passchendaele, he says,
Aye,
isn't it?
aye, aye. And I've had people talk to me about, it's sad in a way that there's been no allocation for away fans at Old Firm games and so on. I think we lose a lot of the spirit of that game. But let's be honest, it's rooted in hatred. As I say in the book, we're both working class, predominantly our fan base, but they're all congruent in the sense we're rebels. They're for the bosses. They're for the state. They're loyal. And that's what gives us our particular identity and life force when we go to see Celtic, and we understand that makes us different from them. So when Celtic play Rangers, it's a working class civil war.
Yeah.
It certainly was
I
that day
mean,
on the pitch.
well, it was, but you know what Marxists would say about the division of the working classes,
It
like,
suits the bosses. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's a distraction from who the real kind of,
Well, man, we'll get drilling deeper because I've read my Marx. Rangers fans are struggling with the entity called false consciousness. We're conscious working class rebels. We know that the state is not on the side of working class people. We know that king and country is a con. We know that we're not on the side of the bosses when it comes to fights with the workplace, etc., etc. I don't think I'm being too hyperbolic when I make these points. If you know where Celtic comes from, we were the oppressed migrant community from the 19th century onwards. Mid-19th century, the Irish famine, or I would call it the genocide, inflicted on Irish Catholics in Ireland by the British ruling class at the time. And so we've navigated those turbulent, tempestuous times, and we've come out strengthened. And Celtic was part of that kind of need for put upon Irish migrants in the west coast of Scotland. But not only there, obviously, I talk about the role of Hibs in the formation of Celtic in the mid-19th century. We had to come up with our own means of survival, our own sense of community, whether it was through religion, the church, Catholic schools, or Celtic was part of that because our assimilation into mainstream Scottish society was blocked. We were the alien horde, people of an alien culture, alien religion who did not belong in Scotland. And we carry that tradition even into the 21st. Obviously it's not as pronounced as it was, but I do remember in the early 80s when I started applying for my first jobs, remember it was a paper application form. There was obviously no internet, etc., no digital. I remember my dad saying, don't tell them in the application that you went to a Catholic school. And I say, okay, then that's just normal. That's mad when you think about it. But that
mm.
was what we had to navigate to get ahead.
You talk about what it was like in Sutton Mains, and you really don't need to preach to me. I grew up in Lark Hall, so you can
Oh, well.
imagine. You talk about what it was like to go to Celtic games, and I've often explained this to people. It was like when we got on that supporters bus and we were driving down the motorway. We'd pick up people in Hamilton as well, like, and then we'd drive to the motorway. It was like our yellow brick road. It was to go somewhere where nobody would judge you offensively or
Well,
discriminatorily
in the jungle, you're
because of
no
what you.
longer part of an alienated minority. You're part of
No, no.
a strong community of true believers. And the light,
Yeah.
and that informed that. I mean, I have never experienced, and I've been a lot of football. I'm sure you have. I mean, obviously, Parkhead, you had to modernise, but so much has been lost with the jungles. You know, with the demise of the jungle, because there was just such a sense of, I wouldn't call it. It was almost righteous anger and defiance against the status quo, with the rebel songs and the full-throated membership of, again, this community. When we go back to our workplace or our communities, maybe you don't feel as part of. This was something that was empowering, and it helped you get through the week in many
No,
respects.
oh, definitely. It was such an event, but it was amazing to think I'm going to go somewhere where being a Catholic doesn't mean that I'm going to get called a Fenian B or whatever, you know.
Well, I thought that was my name growing up in Celtic. It means I say that in the book. I thought my name was Catholic C or Fenian B, because I was called it so routinely.
Yeah. Do you know when I was like, I maybe told it on here with other, but there was like one night I just sometimes you're just tired, you're coming home. We had to turn our blazers inside out so as they wouldn't see the Holy Cross thing
I've
and all
done the
that.
same. I used to do the same.
Yeah, yeah, and you'd go certain ways. And when I used to serve on the altar, it was like, so there was a cross I had to pass on the way home. Night masses, used to get night masses, and I would have to try and go via wood and all that,
Huh?
so I wouldn't like the guys drinking in the corner and all that, because you just knew you were putting yourself in for it. But just one night getting abused, and I'm coming home and I just rounded my mum and dad. Why did you bring me up in this place? Why did you bring me up in this place? Why did you put me through this? She
Why?
says, "Oh, it's been good enough. It was good enough for us, and should be good enough for you." She said, "But I will say, son," she said, "just be thankful that being a Catholic didn't mean we had a different skin colour from the Protestants around us here." She said, "because then our lives really wouldn't have been worth living." And it
And this,
always stuck with me.
well, this cuts into the wonderful aspect of Celtic in this day and age, especially with the anti-migrant hysteria that's been whipped up, similar to what our ancestors suffered in the 19th up to the into the century, right up to our post-war period. This is why our anti-racism is bled into our hearts. It's branded. We're on the side of those who suffer oppression, regardless of race, culture, religion. This is why I think the Palestinian cause is so important and central
So
to
resonant. Yeah.
Celtic's identity, and rightly so. This is why Celtic is a club of universal values. This is why it's so important. I mean, you'll be aware of the massive Celtic diaspora that's out there. I mean, I lived in Los Angeles for a number of years. I used to go see Celtic games at local Irish pub, the Celtic Supporters Club, and it would be packed 7 o'clock in the morning to
Yeah.
watch the game live. Due to the time difference, just as passionate as you would find in Parkhead. So I think a lot of people, maybe because you're in the present time and the team's not doing as well as we would hoped, or even though it did well after under Martin O'Neill, but there's a real discord between the fans and the board, and that's really bad and so on. But that's why I think a book like this helps to give people a sense of belonging, that the board would rather elide, because these are money men. Let's be honest. Desmond, he's an Irishman, he's a billionaire, but he's a capitalist. Right? He's a businessman first and foremost. He sees Celtic as a revenue generating machine. And that's always been the dynamic tension within Celtic. Even the founding fathers, you had Brother Walfred and John Glass. John Glass was the businessman who believed that Celtic had to professionalise if it was going to survive. And there was another sort of faction within the Celtic hierarchy that believed we need to keep Celtic rooted in its original foundational principles of feeding the poor, etc. And John Glass famously used to describe these people as dinner table, soup table cranks.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Soup
and that
kitchen cranks, soup kitchen
soup
cranks. Yeah,
kitchen cranks. So
yeah,
that schism no longer exists within the board, but it does exist within the fans, with the fans in the board. Obviously, listen, we understand the game as it is. Celtic needs to make money, but when the club's got 70 million in the bank and they're failing to qualify for Europe in the qualifiers, that's a problem. That's a board that's completely lost its way. in my view. And obviously Celtic being a public limited company now, they've got shareholders, dividends and so on. So I think this schism is actually quite a good thing, Andrew. I think it will reaffirm either the direction of Celtic going forward. Is Celtic to obviously be successful, but not successful because we've got 70 million in the bank, because we dare to dream, and we have a team on the pitch that fulfills the promise of Celtic as a team that plays wonderful attacking football for the fans and players who get the meaning of the club, and they bring that onto the pitch. I hope the fans win this battle, but I also feel quite sad. I know a lot of Celtic fans share the board's disdain for the Green Brigade. That's a sad thing for me. You might not agree with everything the Green Brigade does and what the presentations and the political statements they make, but you have to understand the wider issue here.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with the Green Brigade. I just wish they would stick to the politics. It's the football that I can't cope with the Green Brigade with their attitude towards football, success and failure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I despise I've made no bones about it. I despise the concept of ultras. One of the things you didn't mention in the book that I thought you might have, I used to like it when the casuals used to try and come round for the Rangers into the jungle at half time, and the jungle would chant en masse, casuals, casuals, get to fuck. Because it was factionalism.
Aye.
They wore a uniform, they were performative. I think all those things can be said at the Green.
The Cowboys movement never took off at Parkhead. That's a fact. It never took
That
off.
was incredible, aye, because they didn't want that entryism, because they didn't want one group of supporters setting themselves apart.
There's
That's
a
what the jungle
hierarchy,
is used to.
some sort of
Yeah,
hierarchy.
and this is what you have, ultra, by its very nature, by the very word.
Well, it's an Italian concept. It's reactionary. You're right. I don't like the flares. I don't like that. I don't think that's in keeping with Scottish football tradition, with Celtic tradition. But yeah, we can agree on that. I think that the ultra movement is rooted in an apartness from the football. It's more about what we do on the terraces rather than supporting the team.
Yeah.
And obviously that can reach a point of critical mass whereby the ultra activities actually have a negative impact on the team and its performance and so on. And obviously Celtic have accrued fines because of activities of the Green Brigade. But in terms of their politics, I think they're
Yeah, I'm right
wonderful.
there. I'm right there. But like, as I say, I do think it's a lot of wee guys that wish they were our age and wish they'd experienced it, because you spoke earlier on about a political awakening. Now, my friend's a kind of sociologist, kind of, and he always says that bizarrely the Troubles in Ireland saved Celtic. If he'd been a kind of, not if not quite right wing, but the support in the 70s. You mention it in the book as well about Paul Wilson. I've
Aye.
interviewed Paul Wilson. The one I always remembered, I'm not going to use the one you use because it's hard to tell, but I'd rather wear a turban than a sash, they used to sing. Yeah. It's like
But in the time that was located, that was seen as progressive. 1970s, you'll know, was, racism was very, what's the word I'm trying to find, socially accepted within the working class. The National Front was on the march. You look at the panoply of like entertainment, Love Thy Neighbour, Ain't Half Hot Mum. It was a different time. So I suppose, Ruthie, if you take it back to that time, that was seen as progressive. It was seen as a kind of support for people wearing a turban over. But it was, I take your point, it wouldn't be something you'd sing today, of course not. But this was time when immigration was starting to become a thing, and as I say, economic chaos was starting to take root, and people looking for scapegoats, and then it's looking at the person with the black skin or the black mask is the problem, the source of all your problems. We're going through a similar process today when it
yeah.
comes to the rise of the far
Well, I
right.
know we've been right. It's scary. We've been right back to it. But what happened with what was going on, the hunger strikers and all that, I think that renewed the Celtic sports political
Yes, yeah,
consciousness.
yeah.
Incredibly so. I'm surprised, actually. I'll be honest. I'm surprised in your book, because I've written about the jungle, Celtic's beating heart, its anti-establishment heart, but also it could be a black heart. I did it in my book. I did a list of the kind of the most heard chants of the 80s. Maggie, we nearly got you, and all that kind of stuff. You don't seem to mention any of the kind of Lord Mountbatten had a boat and all that. I mean, these are the things that I remember from the jungle. I don't know if you put anything like that in the kind of chants that you put
I
in.
put the chant IRA, Irish Republican Army, wherever we go, we
Aye,
fight
but
our war.
it's more a kind of more kind of generic ones. You don't. I mean, the most heard chant in the jungle in the 80s was Michael Fagan shagged your queen. That was it. That was
I
undeniably that
personally
was
don't
the.
remember that chant. I remember Soldier Song, I remember the Boys of the Old Brigade. But you also got to remember, I've got a publisher. And if you look at the Paul Wilson passage, the P word has got an asterisk
I
in it.
saw that. I saw that. I
That
saw
was
that.
not at my behest, that was at their behest. And I argued against that, not because obviously I thought it's got to be authentic, but I understood they have sensitivities and songs like that would not have passed
Yeah.
the publisher's remit. I'm surprised the book actually did pass with some of the politics.
No, I mean the other one. I put all these in my book, and Celtic said if you take a few of these out, we'll stock it in the shop. I said if I take a few of these out, that's no true to what my knowledge and most of the people I knew that started in the jungle, their knowledge of what the 80s was. Because
Aye.
I think it was the ones they wanted out was Maggie We Nearly Got You, and I think it was Michael Fagan shagged your queen. You must have. Nobody could have gone to the jungle. I was probably at the jungle. What 95% of the games in the 80s in the jungle. You must. That was the chant that I can remember most of
No,
my
I didn't. I
peers.
honestly don't remember that chant. No, I don't. I would have put it in the
There was
book.
another version of it. It was even worse. Queen's a whore, Queen's a bit. Michael Fagan licked her out. That was the other one that they used to sing.
What year was that?
It was right throughout. It was right throughout the 80s. When was the Michael
No, I
Fagan
remember
incident?
distinctly Roman and the Gloaming, which I put in the book. The Boys of the Old Brigade, IIRA, Soldier Song. But I
But
don't know.
Argentina, S. Malvinas, and all that. I thought maybe they would have got a hearing because these are all the ones that I remember because they were all specifically tagged. But the other thing that I do remember about the jungle is during the hunger strike, there was a new chant for every hunger striker that died. They would get commemorated.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember those. Honestly, I don't remember any of those. Obviously, the fog of time. As I say, I remember Roman and the Gloaming. The boy. I remember the guys.
That's still sung by the boys at the other
Uh,
side of the stadium.
I remember the men. I remember going to the Celtic 80 Cup final. The older guys, probably in their 30s, linking arms, singing the Boys of the Old Brigade. I remember the
Which is
Rangers
still
bus.
sung. Which is
I
still
remember
sung.
the Rangers bus having all his windows tanned, go on the way to Hampden, the Celtic end, from the bus park. But I don't remember specific songs about Lord Mountbatten. No, I don't. I honestly, I don't remember those. And I was a regular in the jungle through the 80s, so maybe just
Genuinely.
because I was so young, I don't know.
You're the same age as me, genuinely. Like these things,
Genuinely,
like
I would tell you.
you must have drunk more whiskey than you thought you had.
I do remember. I do remember being at Tynecastle, and there must have been some sort of IRA activity at the time. Obviously, it was always on the news. And a section of fans started singing IRA, and another section the Celtic support booed it. Smaller section. So what I'm trying to say there is, it was not a uniform support for the Irish Republican movement, because I think some fans that obviously felt the pressure of British state propaganda, news, and so on, which affected their thinking. So, listen, it'd be wrong to romanticise the Troubles. As I say in the book, I sung those
You do?
songs, but the point is we should never have had to sing them because of the
No,
British mishandling of the North and what
but
happened.
it was a political. What I don't get now it's performative now because we were singing them in '81 because look, like Thatcher was. Wasn't he willing to see the hunger strikers as political prisoners? She was treating them as common
No,
criminals.
she was willing to let them die,
Yeah,
and they did die. And there was a terrible indictment of British state policy. It still continues to this day. But one British soldier has been just seen one getting off, prosecuted for Bloody Sunday, even though under Cameron the British state issued an apology for that, admitted it was an atrocity, it was a crime. That was in 2012. Still not one British member of the parachute regiment has been prosecuted for that crime.
I know, and it was the same paratroopers that were responsible for the
Ballymurphy, and then collusion. We've also got the revelations regarding state knife. Scappaticci, the mole at the heart of the IRA, and they allowed murders to take place so
yeah,
that
to keep his cover, to retain
he
his
was safe,
cover.
so his identity was kept secret. So it was a dirty war. It was a dirty colonial war. In terms of Celtic, that informed a lot of the thinking on the terraces, as we know.
Hugely, hugely, and it really steeled us to, what we believed was happening, which we now know was happening in
Well, I
terms of
do
the
remember.
British
I
state.
remember the activists outside Parkhead, handing out the leaflets and fundraisers, different Irish Republican groups. I remember all that. I remember the conversations on the supporters' buses about what was going on in Ireland and so on. But it was very difficult because obviously these guys had jobs and they had to, obviously, they're lucky because this was before social media and Facebook. And I'm sure, and today, if there were, some of the stuff I heard on the buses, they wouldn't last, because it'd be all over the social media and so on. I've not been to Celtic for a long, long time, but I've spoken to people who have, and they say it's not the same atmosphere. It's much more gentrified. I don't know
I
if you could
suppose
speak.
that's the old Theatre Stadium. That's what happens. That's
Uh,
what happens, and it's. I mean, you look at the ticket prices for the World Cup. It's supposed to be the people's sport and all that.
mental, mental.
Holy moly!
So how can I ask you this question? Are you a season ticket holder?
I am. I am now. Aye.
How
I
much is
was
a season
35
ticket?
years a journalist, and I get made redundant for the Scotsman last year. So, and then I've only got my nephews. I've borrowed it, so I've paid for it
So how
because
much is a season ticket for Parkhead now?
the one I got, I think it's £780 or something,
That's
seven
fucking
hundred and eighty
mental.
pound.
That's a lot of money.
Oh, I know, and
That's a lot.
that's before you've got your European packages and such like.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. But listen, the
I
fans
have
will
to pay
pay
for
it.
my sons as well. I have to pay for my sons as
Well,
well.
the
His
fans
is
will
a
pay
lot.
it because they're so loyal, and that's why, I saw the protest before the Hearts match. It looked a bit. I'm trying to find the right word. I found it quite sad. It wasn't. It should have been more people there.
It was a
The
horrible day. It was a horrible
A
day, and a
horrible
lot of
day.
people just
But the,
don't
bo- the
come
board
to us.
rely the board rely on the fact that people will go and see Celtic come what may, and they know that the only way you're going to affect the board, in my view, would be a widespread boycott of a game. But then you'd be thinking you're hurting the team. I understand the difficulty in making that happen. I think but if there is going to be changes at the top, do you believe there should be changes at the top, Andrew?
Yeah. I believe
The
these
Dermot
are
Desmond's digging his
men
heels.
out of time. Aye, yeah, but I just don't know how I don't know how you would bring it about. You say without boycotting, like the entire season ticket holding base would need to say we're not buying season tickets. Like a lot of the other clubs did when there was chatty trying to kind of gerrymander Rangers into the new co-Rangers into the top flight, and Dundee United and Aberdeen fans and all that just said we're not buying season tickets.
And there's no sign of any alternative owner, any sort of coalition or, coming forward with a hostile takeover bid or anything like that. So, and the big thing about football today, I'm sure you'll agree, is the input of Middle Eastern money, big American financiers. I
Yeah,
don't think Celtic wants to go down that road for
no,
historical
it's
reasons.
out of it could be out of the frying pan into the fire. That's my real worry. That is my real worry. But of course, change is required. Look, in terms of for you, if we go back to, I mean, because it's part memoir as well. We should say that
Now,
it's part memoir. And look, you go into certain, like, going down to Sammy Nelson's testimonial. That always stuck in my gullet because he was a huge Rangers fan. But they all money. I mean, the players knew how to make money as well.
well,
Getting
well,
Celtic in as your testimonial
well,
or something.
Celtic was a guaranteed sellout for a testimonial game. I mean, this was a Wednesday night game. And I remember turning up at the services station halfway down to London, and this was an overnight bus journey. So we're getting into like 5 in the morning, 2 hours away from London or whatever we were, packed with Celtic buses, Celtic support from all over Scotland and beyond. Just amazing times because the fans would follow the team everywhere. And as you're right, for English clubs, Celtic was a shoo-in as a testimonial.
It was a cash cow to be milked.
But that was a very formative experience for a
Yeah,
14-year-old.
well, I'll let people read it in the book, like some of the experience that you did form that day, or some of the forms that you saw that day,
Uh, I
Maybe we
still
could say
remember,
that.
I still remember the Eddie Grant song, "Do You Feel My Love?"
Yeah,
Was everybody, the bus driver put the lights, we got to daylight and he put the radio on and stuff. And I'm looking at all these red buses in London, and then obviously we rocked up outside Soho at 9 o'clock in the morning.
yeah,
Just the characters. I mean, I really try to present these guys, Harkey and Big Tam and guys on the bus that I remember who looked after me or passed on the baton of what it means to be a Celtic fan. The ribald humour, the songs, the pride in being part of something bigger than self. And the Celtic's 80s teams, I mean, football in the 80s in Scotland was a wonderful period if you think of the competitiveness.
Yeah, and you talk about it, and the players, flair players, the number of flair players that there was. Every team had them.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
every team had players that you would
You
enjoy
could change a
watching.
game. Yeah, yeah. And the game wasn't as fast, obviously. It wasn't so much focused on pressing. You always had players who had the luxury of drifting off and they could turn on the magic. And one player that sticks in my mind, who I feel sad about the way he's depicted now, is Charlie Nicholas. He was brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it's because of his punditry and so on. He's not really a Celtic favourite. It's sad because he came through the ranks from the youth setup. Tommy Burns, of course, Davy Provan, Murdo McLeod, Roy Aitken,
Yeah. I mean, you
Elvis
could go right
Gillespie.
through the team. Like,
McAvenny, that was an inspired signing by Celtic from West Ham in '87. That changed the nature of the '87 the centenary season. But
undeniably.
that goal, that third goal, when we needed to beat St Mirren to win the league by 5 goals at Love Street, is one of the best still today ever seen in Scottish football, front to back, the link-up play.
Definitely.
And if you remember, if you think about the state of the pitches, they weren't
I know.
the all-round season bowling greens. They were like, at this time of year, they were muddy, they were like ploughed fields. So the players
Exactly.
had to factor that into their passing, the weight of the pass, how they accepted the ball. I mean, it's just amazing how good the players were if you look at all these factors. And also, the game was much more physical. You know, you were still allowed to tackle. Tackle behind was a thing. Players were tougher then. They didn't go down as easily as they do now. They obviously weren't as well paid, but I think they were more playing for the love of the game than they are today. I know it's easy to look back through rose-tinted glasses at previous eras and say, oh, the game was better then. But I think in many ways it was. It was really raw, it was authentic. But the 80s was a much more raw and authentic decade compared to now. I mean, I do remember, I don't know if you're at that game, where I've always been astounded that Gordon Strachan would ever become a manager of Celtic.
Yeah, I was there. Cause I used to,
We
because I
fucking,
was young.
I don't know if I can say, we
Ah,
hated
yeah.
him. We
I know.
hated him.
Oh,
I
I
was at the
hated
other end
them.
of the jungle when the fan ran on the pitch to attack him.
Yeah,
He was hated.
he was. He was. It was like you're egging the guy on. It was one of
Aye,
the
aye,
ones that he
exactly.
was saying, "Don't go on the pitch." You're going, "Go on and get him." Like, yeah, take him out, man.
He was hated. He was hated because, to give him his due, I'm not a big Ferguson fan, Alex Ferguson. He did instill within that Aberdeen team. They relished playing Celtic
Yeah,
and Rangers, but Celtic. I mean, as I say in the book, I don't know if you'll agree. If you got a draw against Aberdeen at home or
I
away,
know.
it was a good result.
It was. It was. Yep. Especially, but he also Dundee United. You took some pastings up there at Tannadice and such
That's
like, you
right.
know.
Aye, aye, aye. They were good
But I
teams.
mean,
They were.
for you, but like, why no Hibs? You have to ask. You know, if you come from Sutton
Well,
Mains.
I've been asked that. The simple question is, first of all, my influence on my older brother Rab, God bless him, he's no longer with us. He was a Celtic man, so your younger brother, he would take me to see Celtic when they played in, this was from 77 on, when they played Hibs or Hearts. But you've got to remember, I was looking for a sanctuary based on my sense of apartness being a Catholic in an Edinburgh Houses scheme, which began when I went to the Catholic school when I got age 5 and all my pals went to the local state school. Hibs had sublimated its Irish Catholic migrant identity by that time. You know, Hibs was not seen in my eyes as a club that had with an explicit, obviously Hibernian, we know the history, but at this point, Hibs played a key role in trying to force Celtic to bring down the Irish tricolour in the 1950s.
Ah, you
The chairman,
reference that
Harry
in your book.
Swan. So Hibs had sublimated their Irish identity because they felt that would give them a much broader appeal. Interestingly enough, though, it's coming back in Hibs. They've got a James
See that?
Connolly, Hibs
Yeah.
Supporters Club, etc. They're singing. You're hearing more rebel songs at Hibs and all. So that seems to be coming back to an extent.
Anti-royalist streak. It was. It was.
It's coming. It's coming
When
back, and they took away the harp. They brought it back to. It was part of a new badge, but at that point, they never had the harp. It was like the HFC. It was just some benign badge, club
oh, that's
crest.
right.
So Hibs was never really appealed to me on that basis. And there's also been a lot of antipathy between Celtic and Hibs. So you'll know this from the history. Celtic, when they were formed, poached a lot of Hibs' best players under the auspices of
Yeah.
John Glass.
Yeah.
But when Hibs, before Celtic came along, a lot of Hibs support came from Glasgow, Irish migrants. And Brother Walfred's idea was inspired by Hibs, and he invited Hibs before Celtic was formed to play a couple of games against Catholic church teams in Glasgow, and there was huge crowds. And he thought, okay, wait a minute. You know, we can replicate this. Replicate exactly. And this is interesting in terms of the sustainability of Celtic in this regard. To play for Hibs in 1875, I think it was up to the early 80s, 1880s, not only had you to be a Catholic, you had to be a mass attending practicing one. It was very, whereas Celtic early on adopted a policy of anybody can play for Celtic, regardless of creed or religion. And I think that's fed into the magic of Celtic. Because although we're Irish migrant Catholics and proud from that stock, we're also expansionists, we're universal. Because Irish republicanism, Andrew, is a non-sectarian creed. Going back to Wolfe Tone.
Wolf Tone, who's in your book as well. I loved your Bernadette Devlin thing because bizarrely my daughter this week at uni is doing a project in the Black Panther movement, so it was funny to what a quote that is you got there for her when she went to get the keys of
John
New
Lindsay,
York.
aye. Well, I was privileged. When I lived in LA, I'm quite political. I was a spokesperson for the Irish Republican Socialist Committee's North America. That's a long word. They were associated with the Irish Republican Socialist Party. And I
Right.
was privileged to speak, this was early noughties, at the annual African Liberation Day in South Central. And I'd be the only white face in the room. There'd be a black Muslim, there'd be a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Chicanos, Native American Indians. And these were a lot of them were ex-Panthers, and
Right.
they revered the Irish Republican movement in the 1970s because they revered the communities of resistance. You know, within Belfast and Derry, it wasn't just a group that was apart from their community; it was the whole community that was in resistance to British colonialism and loyalist pogroms and etc. etc. This is a history that a lot of people, even within the Celtic family, don't understand or appreciate or have not imbibed enough in terms of their understanding of Celtic. You know, the football is a manifestation of the politics, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I do think there's a bit of retrofitting in terms of the politics because the politics was third. We have a historian on here who's written Matthew Marr, a brilliant historian. Hail History is his ex name, but he's written a couple of books about the days of Celtic, and there's been an attempt by those who want to politicise Celtic to try and put the politics, and it was politics at the core of Celtic's kind of formation. The way that you describe it is like feeding the poor, which I think is a much more kind of political kind of scape of what you would say about what the early Celtic was. Feeding the poor, discriminated immigrants, is a political act in itself.
Yes.
That's what you say in your book, which I love. Like it's a great line. But this whole idea that Celtic were so desperate to see an Irish free state and all that. Like, and these guys that set up, like, they were even just wanting home rule. Most of the guys that were like involved
Yeah.
in Celtic in the early days. This wasn't this strain that we see from the kind of genetic Finleys and all that. It's Celtic's origins are Disneyfied. Number one to me, Matthew disagrees. Number one was religion. It wasn't wanting people to take the soup anywhere else because they would have to renounce their Catholicism. Brother Walford wanted something that would keep the community as the community. That was.
That's certainly part of it. As you know, the Free State
But that
became a
was the
reactionary.
overriding part of it.
The Free State was very reactionary when it was formed. I mean, one wonders what would have happened if James Connolly had survived or Liam Mellows had survived. These great Irish Republican socialists. But let's be honest, the Irish Free State up to the 1970s, 80s even, was a theocracy. You know, the
Yeah,
Catholic Church had so much sway in the morals and the politics and the social and cultural mores of that state. Celtic is part of that very conservative strain of Catholicism.
yeah,
Let's not rock the boat, guys. Let's keep it, let's keep us within ourselves, very insular, inward looking. And I mentioned in the book that the tricolour, I don't know if it's the same one, the original one that flew above Celtic Park was presented by De Valera to Celtic. So Celtic became part of that conservative strain of Irish republicanism. It has different factions, as you know.
yeah. They were kind of all, but that's what I'm saying. They were kind of always that. That was in their DNA.
Yeah,
That is in their DNA. However, the supporters have always been of a different hue. That's
yeah,
what people don't understand. As if this current board doesn't. You can draw a through line
No,
right all the way back.
they're part of the same tradition. There's no doubt. There's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely no doubt about that.
Like you look at it like John McLaughlin, who set up the Scottish League. Like he gave money to the British forces for the Boer War and all that. He supported that
Well,
imperialist misadventure.
many Irish Catholics fought on the side of Franco in the Spanish Civil War. You know, blue shirts, because of the Catholicism that Franco, portrayed himself as being defender of. But even within the Catholic Church, there's a conservative wing, and there's a more liberation theology in Latin America in the 1960s. So there's always been that kind of dynamic tension within the Catholic religion and how it manifests in what maybe say Catholic-minded politics. But the thing about Irish republicanism, I go back to, is a non-sectarian creed. That's not to say there are no sectarians in it. But Wolfe Tone was looking to unite Catholic, Protestant, and Defender. They were against the monarchy. They were emboldened by the ideas, the liberational ideas of the French Revolution. That's where Irish Republican politics, when it sits in an expansionist view, if you look at the early days of the IRA in the 1970s, in prison they were reading the works of Che Guevara, they were studying Ho Chi
Yeah,
Minh,
Rosa
the Vietnam
Luxemburg and
War, etc. But there was a faction within the movement that vilified that. They didn't want to be part of an overarching anti-imperialist struggle or the anti-imperialist struggles that were taking place all over the world. I'm on the side of that. That's my politics. We're a cog in a bigger wheel. Internationalism. And that's why I love Bernadette Devlin and her story and that stance she took on the side of the Black Panthers in New York.
yeah, it was incredible. But I mean, funnily enough, I was saying to my boy was asking me the other day, like he's just turned 16. He said, "Why is there such a why do we take on the Palestinian cause?" He said, why is it seemed as if it's somehow kind of melded with, he didn't use his words, but with the Irish cause?" And I said, "Well, that the greatest supply of guns that the IRA used to get in those early 70s came for the PLO."
Yeah. They trained in the same camps.
Yeah.
They trained in the same camps. I spoke to this guy, this Palestinian who was a member of the PLO, struck up a correspondence, he read my work, and he said he remembers training with Irish Republicans in Libya back in the day and in Jordan. They trained in the same camps. So that was a sense where the world was in revolution. Obviously that's gone now. Obviously, as I say, it's better. I mentioned the whole thing about the Jerry Adams and the peace faction. That's an kind of Republican issue with people who, Brendan Hughes and Dolores Price, who became anti-Adams. I don't want to get into that because I'm not part of that. But I will say, on the few times that I've been to Belfast, I've spoken at a number of events in Derry. It's sad in a way. You mentioned the Disneyland conception. There's an element of that if you go to the falls with the murals and so on.
Yes.
It's become like a tourist attraction, but you could not objectively support the continuation of the armed struggle. It run its course, but who knows how it will end. I think it's more an evolutionary approach under the auspices of Michelle O'Neill and her science people who weren't involved in the Troubles. But there's no peace in the North, you'll know that. There's an absence of conflict, but that's not the same thing as peace. You still got all these walls, these peace walls. You've still got an apartness between the two communities. And there's a struggle going on for the soul. We saw the furore that was whipped up over the flying of the Palestinian flag over Belfast City Hall the other week.
Yeah.
But I think the trajectory of travel is towards a united Ireland. But here's the thing that a lot of Republicans, me included, find hard to grasp. The dead generation's way on the living, Marx said. The struggle, the sacrifice made by Bobby Sands and other hunger strikers, world historical importance. People might ask, would he have died for what's going on today? Because, ironically, when he stood as MP for Fermanagh and Tyrone and won, that was what gave Adams and his peace faction the idea we could have a political direction here. It's a very complex issue. It's a minefield.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're not going to solve this in the
No,
next
we're not going to go into that too much.
5
But
minutes. Like
we're getting away from Celtic. But
this is a Celtic podcast, people.
Yeah.
But these are the roads I love to go down. Anyway, we don't, I mean, that's what Celtic is. Celtic.
Aye.
That's why. That's what I always say. Like you've certain in music. I always say to people, you have bands that not every band can be your favourite band. because they don't encompass enough. They don't pull you in enough directions. They don't tug at your heart the same way. No, every club can be a club that people live and breathe for. But Celtic has got all those. It's got the minerals. It's got all those elements.
Yes.
And this is why we can come on here and we're on a Celtic podcast, and we can go from A to B,
Politics,
through
talking
to
about
Z.
Marx, talking about
Yeah,
revolution,
yeah.
Vietnam, and Che Guevara.
Yeah, Vietnam. We didn't even mention. You do bits about Vietnam as well, and you even managed to bring in like Charlie Tully and such, you've really you've obviously thought I'm going to put it all in there that I want to say about Celtic. But why the distance now? Apart from maybe the obvious, you think it's football's become sanitised. Why your kind of distance from it now?
I think, well, by the end of the 80s, life was taking me in a different direction. I was settling down. I moved to America in the early 90s, and I went back and forward there. Just life took me in a different direction, Andrew. Always be a Celtic man, but Celtic was part of the formative period of me becoming an adult or a man. My politics became more important than football. So there was no definitive moment. There was no kind of sort of catalyst. I just evolved in a different direction. As I say, moving to America, making a living, relationships, etc. And I think Celtic was part of my political journey more than a football journey in some way.
Right? Yeah. No, I
Looking
can see that. I can see
looking
that.
back, it was my entree into radical politics. And then I expanded on that, and got heavily involved in the anti-war movement in America and the run-up to Iraq, and got involved with different Marxist groups, and that took over that became my overriding passion. So yeah, I just evolved to a different point in my life. But the reason I wanted to write this book was I have a very strong view of Celtic and what it represents, certainly what it represented in my life. Its history, and I know that it'll be a bone of contention. As I've said it a couple of times in this chat with some Celtic fans who are of a more conservative mind. Keep politics out of football. I don't hold to that view. The
No,
sport of
I don't.
politics don't. There's
And,
nothing
and I
more
think
political.
most Celtic supporters don't. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating that, because maybe it is half and half. Or there's some people within the Celtic underground, my fellow members, they would say that it's not even half that are interested in the politics. But you saw it when, like, my son proudly held up his Palestinian flag when they did that, protest a couple of years ago.
And they
You
got
know,
the fine, and they had a collection, and they made fortune. And I saw, I actually had tears in my eyes. You saw video clips from Palestinians in Ramallah and the West Bank thanking Celtic fans for that stance. That's a wonderful connectedness, isn't it?
yeah, it is. It is. Well, I've actually sort of somebody for East Jerusalem, Peter Samir, who was brilliant on this podcast. But when I met him I work for the Catholic Church now, but I went through my work because Christian Aid, he's involved with Christian Aid, and he said, "We love Celtic." And I said, "Well, come on the podcast and tell us what it means to you." And he did, really movingly and eloquently. And this is why I do agree with you. Celtic is more than the football club. That shows it. And you also said it's one of the more politically aware. My boy's always quite chuffed. I said it's definitely the most left-wing support in the entirety of the UK. There's no question about it.
I mean, Liverpool are up there to an extent. No, the Celtic in terms of its internationalist identity and its encompassment of, as I say, these great struggles of the oppressed takes it to a different plane altogether. You're absolutely right. This is why I think it's so important, this struggle with the fans and the board. I wish the fans would get right behind the Green Brigade, not because you agree with everything they do. We've talked about that, but because of the precedents that will set if the Green Brigade are allowed to be kind of extirpated from Parkhead as that group, as that block. And even the atmosphere against, I watched the game on TV, it was lacking because the
Yeah,
brigade.
it was a miserable day as well, mind you. I mean, it's no, I can take or leave that kind of. I mean, we're allowed to disagree respectfully. My problem with the Green Brigade is not. It's you dress yourself up in a kind of militaristic kind of uniform, and then you don't show the discipline of any
The
kind of
military.
brigades. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you think back in any kind of, that's where they get their name from, if you
Yeah,
think
yeah,
about
yeah,
the brigades for the kind of the Spanish Civil War and all that, show a bit
yeah,
of discipline,
yeah, Yeah, well, that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Don't allegedly set about like stewards or whatever, like minimum wage female stewards, like
And that's unacceptable. That's completely unacceptable. If that's happened, I mean,
if that's we'll see the court cases. No, that the court always gives us the right.
no.
We've seen that in plenty of like
But
instances. And
they should definitely police themselves. They definitely should police themselves. Yeah.
no, it's not necessarily them either. It's we mad guys running in and want to be part of them. So that's interlopers. So it's not. It's just the people that attach themselves to you rather than.
Provocateurs. Never don't underestimate the prospect of that being happening. People going in there to cause trouble in order to. I don't know. I'm not there, but I would not put it past various actors. Because the Green Brigade are a thorn in the side of the status quo. They've got the stadium. They put on. I mean, I remember the furore whipped up when they did that. I think it was a wonderful protest. And this is where you realise that Scotland never really accepts Celtic. They will insist every Remembrance Day that Celtic has to observe this minute silence, which they know, for historical reasons and cultural reasons, will never be adhered to by the Celtic support in its entirety. But they still
Well,
insist.
it lasted about 13 seconds this year.
But they still insist on trying to impose it, and then they come in with all the tsunami of ordure or Celtic or disrespecting the troops, etc. And why? This is where
But
you have a board that should stand up and say we can't observe that for historical, cultural reasons, for reasons of our own.
But it's no like the minute silence is given to everybody who loses their life in conflict. It's the same. It's the same as wearing a white poppy. If people think you shouldn't wear a white poppy either, because I didn't have my minute to remember the victims of Bloody Sunday. Remember the victims
No,
in
exactly,
Gaza.
exactly,
So it's like this is when rights clash with other rights. I don't
exactly.
understand why. I don't understand why the Green Brigade didn't. If you don't want to observe it, your protest is not to be part of it. But when you protest that denies the rest of us the minute, then you're denying me my right to pray for the victims in Gaza or the victims of Bloody
But that
Sunday.
minute silence is not about Gaza, is it? Though it's about British
I
people.
is it, well, it was like everybody had lost their lives in conflict. That's what Celtic. That's what come over the tannoy. That's what come
Well,
over the tannoy.
I think that's them trying to. I think that's a bit insincere on their part because they're trying to
I
get
don't
people.
think it is. It's
I
moved
think they're
away.
trying to get people to conform for reasons of PR. It's all right saying that, but that's not what this official ceremony is about. Obviously, in this minute silence, I take your point. I think there should be a separate minute silence for Gaza. There should be a separate minute silence for Bloody Sunday. Celtic should perhaps try and organise something like that, but they won't because they don't want to be seen as part of that politics.
But Celtic they're the only club in the UK that don't wear a poppy now. They don't wear poppies in their shirts. But people have conflated have conflated the poppy with the minute silence. I think you can detach these two. I think you can detach these. That's just me.
Mm. Interesting. That's what I'm saying. You get two Celtic fans in an interview, and we can disagree fraternally, of course.
Of course, and it's been an absolute
Likewise.
pleasure, absolute pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed the book.
I did indeed. And as I say, I didn't actually know much about the old Protestant League and all that. Like that was fascinating learning
Yeah,
some of this. I learned. Obviously, I knew the football, but I learned about the politics. Learned about the
Oh,
politics.
it's quite remarkable how extreme things were. John Cormack, and I
Yeah,
mean, there really was an anti-Irish Catholic. I'm trying to find the right word. Hatred in Scotland, and it's still entrenched to this day. We still see the plethora of orange walks, which I think is an indictment of Scottish society, still to this day. So it's not as open as it used to be, but it's still there.
yeah. I think it is very. It's diluted to. I mean, it's no Catholics now that get discriminated against. It's asylum seekers. It's
Yeah, yeah.
refugees.
They are the Irish migrants of yesterday, and that's why I find it sad when I see people from our tradition joining in this kind of
Breaks my
anti-mig.
heart.
It breaks my
It
heart
break.
as well, and it certainly breaks my heart when we see the protests in Ireland itself.
Jeez, yeah.
This is the acme of false consciousness. The men of 1916 did not die for this, in my view. Certainly, most of them did not. The Connolly and Pearson, all that. These were men who who hated British colonialism, understood the symptoms of British colonialism, which is people fleeing persecution and fleeing the malign fruits of British foreign policy, disasters one after the other. So, but these are wider issues, I understand. But anti-migrant hysteria is so ubiquitous now, Andrew.
Oh yeah, does feel like the 70s. You would have written a book like that and you would mention some of the stuff of the 70s. If you'd have written it 15 years ago, people would say, my God, how backward do we seem then? No, it's just reverberated.
So bringing things up to date, Wilfried Nonsey, the new Celtic manager, which, I don't know, I thought he got it wrong on Sunday. And he's just in the door. He got it wrong on multiple levels, I think. But you just know that he's going to suffer racial abuse at Ibrox and Tynecastle. You just know, because I think there has been a black manager in Scottish football before.
John Barnes at Celtic.
John Barnes, yeah, there you go. But John Barnes was a big Liverpool name and so on. So we'll see how he's treated at these away grounds. But I worry about him. I don't think he's built for the Scottish game based on what I've heard so far. I think he's a bit too much. I think he underestimates the fire and the passion and the pressure to get results. When he comes up with statements like, it's not about winning or losing, I thought, mate, this is not an under-12s team you're looking after here.
I know.
And then the board.
Don't forget, Ange used to say
the red and the blue pieces on the board. I thought, who's advising you here?
It's all just the kind of window dressing, but we get too obsessed with some of this window dressing about the tactics board and like whether people say it's not about winning or we just look to kind of micro analyse everything, and
maybe
we need to give them time. Who knows?
We need to give them time. Well, John, look, absolute pleasure to speak to you, and all the very best with the book. Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on. It's been wonderful chatting.
It's been a great chat.
Two grey bearded grizzled men.
I know.
I'm a long way from 1980, that 40-year-old with the green, white and gold Union Jack.
Well, I thought, God, there was a schoolboy era, literally, a schoolboy era. I saw actually Hibs fans with one of them even recently, and I thought they don't. I know you weren't a Hibs fan, but you still see it, and I think it was a Hibs European away game this season. I thought, my God,
that flag was my pride and joy. I know the flag, it was meant to be kind of counter-intuitive in a certain way, but I remember that big guy saying, get that to fuck, get that.
Yeah, I was with him, see when I read that, but big guy was right. God bless you, right?
All right, mate, thank you,
so
take
much.
care. All the best,
thank you.
Brilliant, mate, thank you, bye-bye.
Take care.
Bring me sunshine in your smile.
We hope you enjoyed that podcast. There will be more along soon. Please share the joy of Celtic Underground. Rate us wherever you can find us on your podcast provision, and also subscribe to the celticunderground.substack.com. As you'll be aware, there are two types of subscription. There's free subscription, where you get a certain amount of content delivered directly to your email address, and then there's a paid for subscription, where you get even more content delivered directly to your email address as and when it comes out. Anyway, enough of me. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and this is me, Harry Brady, saying good night and God bless. Good night.
Bring me sunshine in your smile. Bring me laughter all the while. In this world where we live, there should be more happiness. So much joy you can give to each brand new bright tomorrow. Make me happy through the years. Never bring me any tears. Let your arms be as warm as the sun from up above. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love, sweet love. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love.